Boldwood presents Old Girls Go Greek, written by Maddie Please and read by Penelope Freeman. Chapter 1. Being older could be so quiet. I don't mean I was deaf, although I know I was lucky in that respect. A lot of my contemporaries were. Several of them were sporting complicated and by all accounts very expensive hearing aids by the time they passed 60. One of them, who'd been a keen attender of punk concerts and festivals back in the day, put this down to speaker damage. He'd like to stand right next to them, head banging in time to the pounding beat. Another had worked as a builder, a place where a lot of noisy equipment comes into play on a daily basis, and that was in the days before ear defenders. No. What I meant was since I had moved to Lower Begley, my average day was very quiet. Sometimes I didn't actually talk to anyone, apart from my black cat, Ivan the Terrible, and he wasn't a great conversationalist unless I was rattling a bag of cat treats. Then he had a lot to say for himself. When I was a baby, there was always noise, mostly from me if my mother was to be believed. Then, with the arrival of my sister, the decibels increased. There was always someone shouting from their bedroom, arguing about school, who had left the lights on upstairs, why had someone put an empty milk bottle back in the fridge door. After that there was university and the aforementioned discos and what are now called gigs. We couldn't text or email each other because the technology hadn't been invented. Instead, we just left our doors open and shouted to each other. Then, with marriage to Malcom and the arrival of our own daughter, the cycle began again. But suddenly, at 64, everything went quiet. Well, it did for me because I had moved, on my own, into a house on a no-through road in the middle of the countryside. Beautiful, but relatively silent. My daughter had grown up and gone out into the world, my husband ditto. Well, at least Malcom had gone, running off into the uncritical embrace of his secretary. Whether he had grown up was debatable. And that left me moving out of the marital home where I had expected to end my days, suddenly living quite happily for the most part on my own. And after about 3 weeks, it struck me how noiseless, how utterly soundless a house could be. It was a fairly modern place, too, so there wasn't even the friendly creak of old beams, the tiny scurry of mice in the attic. There was just me. Occasionally I would hear the slam of my neighbour's car door or the hum of her husband's lawnmower on sunny afternoons, or there might be the rumble of a tractor going past my house to the fields beyond it. Tranquility suited some people, but I didn't like it much. I was used to the bustle of work and family life. I liked it when my daughter brought home her friends for unexpected visits and raids on the fridge. I'd always liked company, friends dropping in for coffee and perhaps a grumble about how it was impossible to buy comfortable shoes that looked more attractive than the boxes they came in. Within a few weeks of moving, I knew I needed to do something. Well, no one else was going to do it for me. That's another thing I'd realised. I might still have family, friends and relations, but in the end, after the divorce, the buck for everything, bills, utilities, repairs, gardening, decorating, stopped with me. It took some getting used to. I tried a few different activities. I was fortunate in that there was a village hall within walking distance of my house, where a lot of people like me, grey-haired, retired, congregated for classes. There was yoga, slimming, knitting, pottery painting, badminton, jewellery making, that sort of thing. After a few failed attempts to find something that would keep my attention, I decided to try the art class, which was restarting for a new term and had been much publicised in the local village WhatsApp group. Well, I did get a grade 4 at O-level all those years ago, and although my mother had rolled her eyes at this, at least I had passed. The new brush art class. Spring term starting this week, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Beginners welcome. No special materials needed. Just bring your enthusiasm. It was held on Tuesday mornings. I went for the first time on an unusually beautiful day in February, when the sun was shining, the sky was the pure, cloudless blue of an Enid Blyton illustration, and birds were twittering in the hedges as I passed. The small car park of the village hall was already filling up, and I could see ladies of my vintage, some of whom I sort of recognised, a couple of them lugging art folders and impressive boxes, filled presumably with paints and pencils, and maybe crayons for all I knew. I, meanwhile, had dug out the battered tin of Rowney watercolours that had been Nicky's when she was at school, and every pencil I could find, plus a new eraser, and I had stashed them all in an old canvas holdall and slung it over my shoulder. I felt quite bohemian. As I reached the door, I took a deep breath and strode in. "Hello there. I didn't know you were coming too. I would have given you a lift if I'd known. It's me, Anita." I turned to see a cheerful-looking woman of about my age, who I recognised as my nearest neighbour. We had waved at each other from our cars a couple of times, and once she had dropped off some post which had been put through her door by mistake. Like me, she was looking around at the bustle of other people, most of whom seemed to know what they were doing. "Meg Foster, lovely to meet you properly. Well, I thought I'd give it a go," I said, pleased to see a familiar face. "I can't spend my life hoovering. I'll have no pile left on the living room carpet if I carry on." Anita pulled a sympathetic expression. "Me too. And now the spring is here, Rick wants us to be out in the garden from dawn till dusk. He's so fussy." "Yes, but your garden is beautiful. I've seen bits of it over the fence. Not like mine. I like to describe it as a wildlife haven. Heaven knows what's living in the woodpile." "Don't look," she said with a grin, as she lifted 2 chairs from the stack. "Are you any good at this painting lark?" "I doubt it. I haven't picked up a paintbrush in ages, for over 40 years, unless it was to finish off my daughter's homework." "Great. Come and grab this chair and one of those easel things and sit by me," she said. "I started last year. I'm completely hopeless, but I do enjoy it. And after the terrible weather we've had, if I stayed inside any longer, I'd lose the plot completely. And they're a very nice group, and it's quite fun, although some of them take it very seriously." The sound of several elderly people getting themselves sorted out was deafening that morning. A tall, rather stout man in a baggy Aran sweater had taken charge and was shouting over the hubbub, trying to organise everyone, and happily all the women were largely ignoring him. It took a good 20 minutes before we had settled into a circle, easels propped impressively in front of us. It turned out Aran's sweater man wasn't actually in charge at all, and the class was being led by a young blonde woman in fuchsia dungarees and a batik headscarf who had turned up 10 minutes late, much to Aran's sweater man's annoyance. Completely unabashed by his hard stare, she went to stand in the middle of our circle and clapped her hands to shut us all up. The noise subsided quite suddenly, so that only Aran's sweater man could be heard muttering, "Paid good money to come here. 10 o'clock means 10 o'clock. Our tutor ignored him. "Good morning, everyone, and welcome. For those of you who are new today, my name is Cassandra." "In which case, I don't believe a word she says," I murmured, and next to me Anita giggled. "And I run this group, and also one in Begley Mortimer, and one in Begley Moor. If you have any friends over this side of the river who want to join us, we're a bit down on numbers at the moment, which is why some of the other Begleys have joined us for the time being. And I know you want to get started unleashing all those lovely flowing creative juices." "Don't worry, I've got some tissues in my bag if things get messy," Anita muttered back, and I stifled a snort of laughter. "So I thought we would start by very quickly introducing ourselves so that new people know who is who. Would someone like to start us off?" "I'm Dennis Kitteridge from Lower Begley farmhouse," Aran's sweater man said, taking the initiative, "and I'm delighted to see I'm still the only rooster in this henhouse of lovely ladies." "I think he means cock," Anita whispered. And this time I did laugh and had to pretend I was sneezing. I used to paint a lot as a child. That was before I went into finance. I got a Blue Peter badge for a painting I did of John Noakes and Shep. My wife says my paintings are as good as anything you see on that BBC programme. In fact, I've applied 3 times, but I never seem to get asked. Not even as a wildcard entry. Cassandra gave a wide-eyed, slightly mad smile. Marvellous. Welcome back, Dennis. And who's next? Cassandra went quickly round the circle, introducing Maureen, who used to be a nurse, Irene, who was a retired dentist, Beryl, who had worked for the government, but if I told you more, I'd have to kill you, Gwen, who seemed very flustered by the question and didn't know quite what she had done, Polly, who had worked on the delicatessen counter in the local supermarket, doing cheese, and Janet, who had been a hairdresser. Anita had been an accountant, and I had been a school secretary. Excellent. Now we're all friends, let's get started. There's tea and coffee and biscuits in the kitchen for anyone, of course, and I have some vegan rice cakes if anyone wants one. Pass, I murmured. Won't fight you for those, Anita agreed. Give me a Tunnock's tea cake any time. Cassandra had brought along a bunch of sunflowers from the local supermarket, which she unwrapped, dumped in a milk jug, and put in the middle of our circle on a table. And remember, there's no such thing as a bad painting, Cassandra added confidently. Just remember to think about those marvellous elements: shape, form, texture, space, value, colour and line. Those are the magic ingredients. The shape of these flowers, the space they occupy, the vibrant colours of nature. After a bit more chatter and Gwen fretting in case anyone wanted tea already or should we wait, we finally got down to some painting. I stared at the blank paper in front of me and wondered where to start. Eventually I did a few hesitant pencil strokes and then rubbed them out again. I looked around, worried in case anyone had seen the depth of my inability. Next to me I could see Anita was already splashing watercolours onto her paper with some abandon. Last term I tried realism. This time I've decided to be an impressionist, she said in answer to my inquiring look. I'm doing my impression of those flowers, focusing on, what did she say? Colour and shape. Those flowers are yellow, I said, a bit confused. They're red and blue to me. I refuse to be hidebound by convention. I think I'll put my new dog in there too. You must have heard him barking at the squirrels in your oak tree. Bonzo's only a pup. He loves the squirrel. The morning passed quite peacefully, and Cassandra wandered around behind us, murmuring comments and encouragement. Lovely shape, Irene. Gwen, you could use a bit more of the space, don't you think? Rather than squeeze everything up into a corner. You don't have to be afraid of the paper, it's your friend. Yes, Dennis, I can see where you're going with this, and daring use of, shall I say, an almost architectural approach. Anita, very bold use of form. Beryl, excellent as always. Meg, let your brush lead you onwards. Those flowers are happy, aren't they? Paint them with joy. Daphne, splendid execution of the jug. I did my best, and halfway through, when we were allowed a 10-minute break for coffee, we sneaked glances at our classmates' paintings. They were all very different, and sitting on the other side of me, Beryl's was by far the most accomplished. I stopped to admire it. Gosh, this is absolutely brilliant, I said. Beryl, who looked about my age and was swathed in a jumble of brightly coloured scarves and sweaters, smiled modestly. I haven't painted for ages. I'm enjoying this. I wish I'd started up again years ago. My last husband used to say I should stick to walls and skirting boards, but what did he know? He couldn't sign a Christmas card without expecting a Nobel Prize for literature. Do you ever sell them? I asked. That's really gorgeous. Beryl tilted her head at her painting and smiled. Actually, when I was short of cash, I used to work as a life model in Paris back in the 70s. Now, if times get hard, I'm thinking of selling off my old nudes. 10 quid to get one, 20 quid not to get one. I think my dog should be bigger, Anita said, flicking her paintbrush carelessly at the canvas. Perhaps I'll give him a ball, too, and Bonzo is growing a sort of doggy moustache. I'll add that. You crackers, I laughed, loading up my brush with more yellow paint. I've spent more than enough of my life being told what to do, she said, wiping a smear of blue paint off the floor. Now I'm retired, I can do what I like as long as I don't break any laws. Anyway, this is an impression of Bonzo's ball because the real thing is punctured and rather flat. I'm quite proud of him, actually. There's not a dog toy out there that he can't destroy. On the other side of the circle there was a small commotion as Gwen knocked her water over, and she did a strange little tiptoe dance, trying not to get her canvas shoes wet, while Polly laughed and shouted, "Clear up on aisle 3. "You're new to the village, aren't you?" Polly called across from the other side of me. "Haven't you just moved into High Winds?" I agreed I had. "Nice house. We went for a look round when it first came on the market. We didn't want to buy it, we were just being nosy. Anyway, Bruce said there wasn't room for his model railway. It just about fills our attic. Sometimes he goes up there in the middle of the night to change the points when the new timetables come into operation. Still, he's not hurting anyone, and I never have a problem wondering what to buy him for his birthday. Are you all settled? Boxes all unpacked?" "I did them all in the first week," I said proudly. "Marvellous, well done you. Bruce and I still have some packing cases we haven't looked at, and we moved into the Briars 31 years ago next week." "Got any cardboard left over?" Anita said. "Rick's always looking for some to flatten and put down over bits of garden. Cheaper than weed-proof membrane and more ecological." "The trouble is, I find myself agonising over cardboard boxes these days," Beryl said. "Some of them are really good boxes, and I hate to get rid of them because they look so useful." "And are they?" Anita said. Beryl shrugged. "No, not very often. But it's no worse than men keeping random bits of wood in the shed because they might come in handy one day." We chatted happily about life in the village for a few minutes, and I began to relax. I was enjoying the company of new people, too. I began to think this could be the activity and the group for which I had been looking. All of a sudden I stopped applying paint with an uncertain hand and a small brush, and started being a bit braver with my brush strokes. Perhaps Anita was right. I shouldn't be hidebound by convention either. I swiped a rather bold brushful of pale lavender paint under the edge of a leaf to create a shadow, and I leaned back to admire it. I was rather proud of it, actually. Maybe a bit more colour in my life was what I needed. That and the occasional bit of excitement. "There you are. Such a happy little flower, isn't it?" Cassandra said, coming up behind me and clapping her hands unexpectedly. My paintbrush flew up into the air and landed on Anita's lap, splattering her jeans with purple paint. She gave me a look. "These jeans are my favourite. They're Versace, I'll have you know." I gave a gasp of horror. "Really?" Anita rolled her eyes. "No, of course they aren't. They were from the market about 10 years ago. Stop looking so tragic." When Cassandra called that it was time to start clearing up, I was amazed. The hours had passed so quickly, and for the first time in ages I had really enjoyed myself. Everyone seemed very jolly and encouraging, and there was a fair bit of local gossip floating around too. Details of the couple who had taken over the shop, whether or not the produce fair in September was going to take place, how someone called Elspeth had a gentleman caller who used to be married to Judith, the woman from Scotland, what the young farmers were doing in the pub on Saturday nights, and who everyone suspected of breaking the window in the bar. someone called Short Kev. It was fascinating, and a great insight into village life. Dennis began barging about, organising the chairs back into the storage room, while Gwen collected the mugs on a battered tin tray decorated with the Queen's Silver Jubilee and started washing up. Beryl, meanwhile, was standing admiring her painting until Dennis took her easel away. "Typical man," she said, giving him a hard stare. "He was just as bad last term, trying to organise us all the time. I hate it when people do that. We're not at school. How did you both get on?" "Good fun," I said, "as long as no one looks at the painting." Beryl flapped a hand at me. "It's fine. We're all a bit anxious at first. You'll get the hang of it. Nice brushwork with those leaves. And Anita, I'm loving that dog. He looks real character."
"What dog?"
Dennis blustered, overhearing.
"There wasn't a dog."
"He's my spirit animal," Anita said. "Couldn't you see him?" Dennis stomped off, muttering, to fold up some more easels, and Anita and I grinned at each other. "So, how have you settled in? You've been there for a few weeks, haven't you? I kept meaning to come round and say hello properly, and then it was Hogmanay, and Rick and I went off to Scotland with our dance group for 2 weeks, and I came back with a lurgy that's been going round. Now the spring is coming, I won't see anything of him. He'll be out bird-watching with his mates, or mowing and fussing and doing all sorts of manly things in the garden. He's planning a bonfire too, so apologies for that when it happens." "I like the smell of a bonfire," I said, "as long as you're not planning on burning car tyres." "I shouldn't think so, although we do have one. He's got some idea he might paint it white and turn it into a planter." Anita looked at her watch. "I must get back and make some lunch, but why don't you come round to my house tomorrow about 3 for a cup of tea and a jammy dodger? Rick's planning to spend a few hours in his greenhouse, and if you're there, he can't expect me to come and help. He was washing the glass panes the other day, and even after all these years, he still thinks I'll find it as exciting as he does. What do you say? You'd be doing me a massive favour, and I have a hidden agenda, and I can make up for my lack of hospitality at the same time." "I'd love to," I said. "Excellent. You can tell me everything about yourself. Word is in the village you are a rich widow looking for a new husband, one of the new brand of London escapees who any day now is going to complain about the smell of the farm up the lane." "Totally wrong on every point," I said. "I'm a divorcee from Bristol. I've moved up here to be closer to my daughter and her husband who live in Cheltenham."
"Lower Begley is a nice village," Beryl said. "You'll like it as long as you don't get involved in local politics. I've lived here most of my life. I watched the new estate by the old post office being built, and your house too. I remember when all this was green fields. That's the sort of thing old people say, isn't it? Still, I suppose people have to live somewhere." Gwen came out of the cupboard with a triangular floor brush that was taller than she was and started sweeping up some debris, fretting about the paint water spillage and wondering if she needed to do anything about it. "Stop making a fuss, it's just a splash, Gwen," Dennis boomed across the hall. "The new girl made more of a fuss than you did. There's a splodge of her purple paint by the window, and by the way, you've missed a bit. I sharpened my pencil over there."
"I'll bloomin' sharpen his pencil for him," Gwen muttered through gritted teeth. "He did call me a girl, though," I said. Chapter 2. The following afternoon I cleared away my rather unsatisfactory sandwich lunch, cheese and pickle, and fed the cat for the second time, as evidently the first offering wasn't acceptable. "Is that better, my boostiful boy?" I said in the squeaky voice I sometimes used when speaking to Ivan. My cat returned a baleful stare and looked pointedly at the cupboard where I kept the dreamies. "Does he want a treat?" I said, trying to annoy him. "Does he? Does he?" Ivan almost sighed with impatience, and if he could, I think he would have tapped his claws on the floor. He rewarded me with a couple of meows, and heaven help me, I meowed back. I'd read somewhere that people meow more to their cats than their cats do to them, and it looked as though I was slowly sliding into cat owner senility. I would be buying him seasonal-themed collars next, and little hats. It really was time I got out more. I slung a few random treats into Ivan's bowl, the one decorated with the smiling cat, which was so far from Ivan's nature as to be ridiculous, and having told him where I was going and assuring him that I wouldn't be long, I walked down the lane to Anita's house. It really was the most beautiful part of the country, with broad fields, distant views of the Black Mountains, and wild flowers just beginning to emerge from the hedgerows. It was certainly a lot different from where I used to live, a house that Malcom and I had bought together 40-something years ago, just after we had married, and where we had raised our daughter Nikki. Originally, we had been on the edge of a small town, but over the years new housing developments had gradually eroded the fields and enclosed our garden, and Malcom had become increasingly tetchy as a result. Then 6 years ago, his branch of the bank had closed down and he'd been offered early retirement, and shortly afterwards it had all come out about the affair he had been having with his secretary, his dissatisfaction with life and with me, how he needed to find himself, possibly under some rock, I had suggested. Once things had been put in motion, everything had changed. Not just my marital status. In fact, it had almost been a relief when he agreed we should sell up as part of our divorce, and I had left the noise and muddle of the new ring road and moved to the countryside, where traffic disruption usually involved 2 tractors or some cattle being moved up the lane to a new pasture. When I went through the front gate that afternoon, I saw Anita hanging out some washing, while a small brown and white dog leapt and barked encouragement at her feet. "Ah, there you are," she said with a wide smile. "Come on in, don't take any notice of Bonzo, he's just excited to see you, although he gets excited at everything. I'll give him some peanut butter, that'll shut him up." I followed her through the back door into a large kitchen where wooden cabinets and cupboards surrounded a scrubbed pine table and chairs. There were bits of shredded dog toy and a tumbleweed of dog hair under the table. Bonzo pounced on the remains of a dismembered toy dinosaur and raced outside into the garden. Anita closed the door behind him with a sigh of relief. "Excuse the mess," she said, picking up a pile of paperwork and unopened letters and dumping them at the other end of the table. "Now then, tea or coffee?" "Either," I said. "Express a preference," Anita said, holding up her hands. "Otherwise I'd have to decide, and I'm not good at that." "Tea," I said. She flicked the kettle on and took some mugs out of a cupboard. "Yorkshire tea or compost? I've got some rhubarb somewhere. Rick wanted to try it. We had 1 cup because he'd read it was health-giving. I told him that might be true, but it would also cause me to lose 94% of whatever joy I had left in life." "Ordinary. And I've brought you some biscuits," I said, pulling them out of my bag. "Perfect. Rick's just eaten the last of the jammy Dodgers I promised you. Either that or Bonzo has got at the tin. Like master, like dog. Both of them are so greedy. Now then, what did you think of our little gathering yesterday? I must warn you, take no notice of Dennis. He behaves like Michelangelo in a tweed jacket half the time. Beryl is far more of a leader and a much better artist too." "She certainly is, and she seems very interesting," I said. "We all think she used to be a spy, but we have no actual proof of it. Not that you would expect to see her with a secret camera going round Tesco or lurking in the library waiting for her Russian handler to walk in with a copy of Woman's Own under his arm." "Page 10, I said in a Russian accent. "The microchip is under the article about cholesterol." Anita spluttered with laughter and passed me a mug of tea. "So you'll keep coming to the art class?" "I do hope so. We could do with some fresh blood, and you seem very jolly. The tutor used to be Maud, who ran the village shop, But when that was sold, she went to the Cotswolds to live with her daughter in Lower Slaughter. I agreed I would, and we chatted pleasantly for a while, drinking tea and eating biscuits, until Anita's husband Rick appeared at the back door, holding out his hands in front of him like a surgeon. "Boots!" Anita shouted, and he kicked off his Wellingtons. "You must be Meg," he said with a smile as he padded over to the sink. "I won't shake hands, and don't come too close. I've been up to my elbows in blood, fish and bone. Have you asked her?" Anita fixed him with a glare. "Rick, mind your own business. I'm just softening her up with her own biscuits." "Ask me what?" I said. Anita gave a dramatic sigh. "The painting holiday, hasn't she mentioned it yet?" Rick said, drying his hands on a tea towel. "You'd better agree, otherwise Dennis will monopolise her. Did you know he's got the hots for my wife? And no one wants to watch that all week, do they? Can you imagine him telling everyone where to go and what to do all the time, trying to corral everyone onto the bus and insisting everyone stays together?" "Well, I'm not having that. I'd rather not go at all," Anita said. "Look, if you'll just let me get a word in, I'll tell Meg the details. There is a painting group trip to Greece in May. So in 3 months' time, Beryl, Gwen and I were planning to go with Beryl's sister Effie, who wasn't there yesterday because she's walking the Pilgrim Way in Spain, probably with a cockleshell in her hat. And then she's off to America to stay with some friends, so we probably won't see much of her at all before we go. Now, Gwen has told me she doesn't think she can come on the trip at all. She's having her garden wall repointed, and she feels she needs to be around to supervise things. And if he finds out, Dennis's ears will prick up like Bonzo's do when he hears the postman's van coming down the lane. And I don't think we could bear it if Dennis brought his brother Ronald in Gwen's place. So please say you'll come. Everything is arranged. Cassandra's sister Gillian lives out there, and she's going to be our tour leader." I did what I always did and tried to think of a reason why I couldn't go. I played for time. "Wow," I said. "That's a bit of a shock. I wasn't expecting that." "It's his fault," Anita said, giving Rick a hard look. "I was hoping to ease it into the conversation more gradually. He's going to be away bird-watching in Scotland that week with an old friend, so it was his idea that I should have a break too. You do seem good fun, and it will be such a great opportunity. And Gwen is already fretting about what might happen to her wall if she isn't there to watch. I don't think she's planning to actually wield a trowel, but she was captain of the Girl Guides back in the day, and you never know what they've picked up. She's already starting to witter on about losing her holiday deposit, so you'd be doing her a favour too. It's May 7th for 8 days, flying out from Birmingham to Santorini, which is such a lovely Greek island. Nice hotel near the seafront, in an adorable town, and a minibus to drive us to various locations." "It does sound tempting," I said thoughtfully. "And I haven't had a proper holiday for years." "I'll send you an email with all the details," Anita said. "Beryl went a few years ago with her sister Effie, and she says it's lovely, and even if you don't do any proper painting, it'll be nice to get some sunshine, won't it? In fact, I've got a printout somewhere, maybe in this basket." She started rifling through the stack of paperwork, eventually pulling out some sheets of paper held together with a giant paperclip that looked like a fish. "Take a look, don't hang about, and then I'll make you a copy and then some more tea." "And me," Rick said, pulling up a chair. "And by the way, I saw Steve this morning. He's been riddling out his shed, and he gave me some really great bits of wood he's been keeping." "And what are you planning to do with those?" Anita asked, giving me a knowing look. "Oh, I don't know, but they're too good to throw away. I'm sure they'll come in handy." I got home to find my cat had left a dead mouse in the middle of the kitchen floor, which he obviously wished to exchange for something more palatable. Perhaps my daughter, who only lived 20 minutes away, would watch the house for me and feed Ivan if I went on holiday. Yes. The more I thought about it, the more the prospect of a trip to somewhere different did sound really appealing. I felt a little shiver of excitement at the prospect. The last holiday I'd had was to Spain with Malcom, where he had made friends with a group of card dealers who were on a works jolly and largely left me to my own devices, except for meal times when he had complained about everything from the cutlery to the service. Being on my own, and yet with some friends, would solve the problem of being a solo traveller. And I would have my own room and bathroom, possibly one with a sea view, and the opportunity to do something a bit different for once. I browsed through the paperwork Anita had copied for me. The hotel looked clean but basic. The views were simply wonderful. All the locals seemed to be happy and smiling. There was a little internal courtyard where breakfast was served, lemon trees in the gardens and olive groves on the hillside outside the town. And actually, the more I thought about it, I couldn't think of any reason why I couldn't go. No, that wasn't the way I needed to think. I should go for a positive reason. Because it sounded like fun, and I wanted to. And travelling to Santorini. A bit of painting, seeing the blue of the Mediterranean glittering in the sunshine. New food to try, new friendships to consolidate. A bit of, dare I say it, excitement. Yes. They were good reasons to accept the opportunity. The alternative was nowhere near as interesting. Ivan barged in through the cat flap as he always did, his progress impeded by either his thick black fur or his increasing gut from too many treats, and he stopped with something like outrage to see me in my own kitchen and fixed me with a look. I tried meowing at him a couple of times to no effect, and then went to check my emails. Then I watched a delightful reel on Facebook of adorable cats nuzzling up to their owners. Ivan jumped up onto the other end of the kitchen table and watched me, so I turned the laptop around to show him. "That's what you should be doing," I said. "Look at that nice cat, being cuddly and grateful. He's not sneering at that rather hunky fireman who has just rescued him from under the floorboards as though he's useless. I bet that cat won't hawk up fur balls in the middle of the night, right where the fireman puts his feet down in the morning." Ivan reached out a casual paw and knocked a tin of pencils onto the floor. "Right, that settles it. I'm going on holiday," I said. "I'll get Nicky to come in and feed you while I'm away, if you're lucky." Ivan sat down neatly, curling his tail around his front paws. "If you don't like the idea, I'll put you in the cattery for a week." Ivan ignored me, stretched hugely as though he had just finished a hard day's work, and jumped down and started sniffing around the kitchen, obviously looking for his mouse. 3 months later, after a horribly early start, we arrived in Santorini on a bright, sunny morning and found the transfer bus waiting outside, exactly where it should have been. Then there was an hour's journey from the airport to the village where we were staying, until at last we stood outside our hotel. Hotel Costas was painted in curly script on the wall. The building was charmingly rustic, with faded blue shutters at every window, canvas sun canopies over the balconies, and there to welcome us at the front door, a tabby cat with her 3 kittens. Almost immediately the mother cat started meowing and practically pointing at her empty feed bowl. A feisty-looking woman with an impressive bosom underneath her flowery overall came out and shooed them away, and they scattered, the mother cat leaping up the bougainvillea that covered the front of the hotel, reaching almost to the roof. She threw up her arms. "Kellos ithiedze olusas. Welcome, everybody." We did what any party of older English tourists would do. We nodded and smiled and said how happy we were to be there. Beryl leaned forward. "Vorume napume? Can we come in? It's very warm out here." We looked at her in amazement. "I didn't know you spoke Greek," I murmured. Beryl gave a modest smile. "I picked it up when I worked in Athens in the late 70s.
The wonderful scent of all the citrus trees, red carnations all over the ground. I remember it like it was yesterday. There was a lot going on then, and I had to blend in. "Welcome to Hotel Costas. I am Nina," our hostess said with a wide smile, and she ushered us into the cool of the marble-floored hallway, where we saw a woman I assumed was our leader, Gillian, pacing around on her mobile phone and looking rather stressed and annoyed. Her face lit up when she saw us, and she ended her call. "Come in, ladies. I'm Cassandra's sister, Gillian. So sorry not to be at the door to greet you. I've been having a few last-minute problems. There's always something. Never mind, let's get you settled into your rooms." She picked up a wicker basket of keys and started to hand them out. "Costas and Nina are the owners, and they're here to answer all your queries. There isn't a lift, but Costas will take your bags to your room for you, so please don't struggle. And now then, Anita and Meg, here are your keys, rooms 4 and 5. You're in the front of the building on the first floor. Beryl, I know you and your sister wanted ground floor rooms, so you're in room 1. Effie is next to you in room 2. She came on an earlier flight from Paris. I think she's up on the roof terrace at the moment." "I know what that means," Beryl said. "She's sneaking a cigarette. I've been telling her to quit for years." "All the others will be arriving soon. They chose the later flight, and I think it was delayed," Gillian said, stabbing at the buttons on her mobile again. "What others? I thought it was just Dennis who hadn't arrived," Anita said. Gillian looked surprised. "Didn't Cassie tell you? Honestly, she's so scatterbrained sometimes. But it's always nice to meet new people, isn't it? Such a treat. And I couldn't possibly do this for just 4 people. Think about it. And Dennis, of course, so that makes 5. I'm surprised he didn't come with you, but then he and the others said the early flight and a 4 o'clock start would be too much for them. Anyway, let's get settled in, and then at 3 o'clock prompt we can all assemble back down here, and I'll take you for a special introductory walk around the town. I've lived and worked here as a tour guide for years, and I know a great deal about the area, so synchronise your watches." Our rooms were small but spotlessly clean, each with whitewashed walls, a tiny shower room and pale blue curtains, and shutters, which were closed against the rising heat of the day. Pushing them open, I stepped out onto the little balcony, which was shaded from the sun by a white canvas awning. I could see that it was also the kitten's daybed, and 3 furry faces peered down at me. Heaven knows how they got up there. Looking across, I saw Anita on her balcony. She called across at me, "Isn't this great? Quick, get unpacked and we can go and find Effie. She's quite a card, you'll love her. Then we can get a drink and a late lunch somewhere. I'll be round in 10 minutes. "What about the guided walk?" I called back. Anita pulled a face. "Not likely. I'm not waiting, are you?" "Cooey!" someone shouted from the street below us, and we leaned over the balcony railings to see Beryl and another grey-haired lady sitting on the bench outside the front door. "Hurry up!" Beryl called up to us. "We're ready to go exploring. See you in a bit." I absolutely loved the thought that I was about to go out exploring the little town, and with some new friends too. It sounded far better than being taken on a guided walk, as though we were a school party who couldn't be trusted not to get lost. I couldn't wait. I heaved my case onto the bed and unpacked it, wondering why I had brought 2 thick sweaters and even a scarf with me. Had I brought enough T-shirts, and should I have brought more than 1 sundress? I hung everything up in the little white wardrobe, which threatened to topple forwards unless I spaced everything evenly along the rail, and then put all my toiletries into the bathroom. Instead of the usual supermarket own brand, I had made some impulsive holiday purchases of expensive shampoo and conditioner, and I put them on the shelf inside the shower with considerable satisfaction. I was filled with the wonderful sense of being at the start of an adventure. I was somewhere different, sunny, and undeniably picturesque. Outside there was a delightful view of white houses, the occasional blue cupola, and the tantalizing backdrop of the sea shimmering in the sunshine. And Anita, Beryl, and Effie were waiting for me to join them. Yes,
I could have done this trip alone, but I had the feeling it was going to be a lot of fun with them there too. "Come on, there's no time to waste," Anita said as she came in after a perfunctory knock on my door. "Oh, do hurry up, I'm dying to get out there and look around, and I'm so hungry. It's ages since we had anything decent to eat. Beryl and Effie are still waiting for us by the front door." "So, we definitely aren't doing the guided walk?" I said. She shook her head and flapped a hand in dismissal. "I'm not being herded around like a party of school kids, and Beryl and Effie have been here before, so they won't want to be shown where the chemist is or the supermarket. It's much more enjoyable to explore on our own, don't you think? And it's an island. Remember, the worst that can happen is we go round in a big circle." I always used to think that when Bergerac was on television back in the 1980s. There was nearly always a car chase, and what's the point when there was nowhere to go? "Still worth watching for John Nettles, though," I said, as we went downstairs. "He was so handsome. I had such a crush on him. And in Midsummer Murders, too." "There can't be anyone living in Midsummer these days, what with the abnormally high death rate. You'd think the Met would want to investigate," Anita said, and I laughed and agreed. Outside, the afternoon was warm and pleasant, and incredibly quiet. Just the occasional sound of a voice or music playing from someone's open window. I was introduced to Effie, who was dazzling in a swirling green maxi dress and a yellow sun hat patterned with cartoon ducks. She looked a slightly younger and fluffier version of Beryl. "Effie," she said with a sweet smile, "short for Euphemia before you ask. Thanks, Dad. Now, let's get going before Gillian spots us escaping and drags us back for roll call." There didn't seem to be much traffic at all. Just once or twice a delivery van passed the four of us as we made our way down the road towards the sea. At last we stood transfixed by the prospect of the shining Mediterranean in front of us. "Isn't it marvellous?" Anita said. "I remember when I went to Rhodes with a group of friends. We couldn't believe how blue and clean it was, and they had a great time in Mallorca. I wish I could have gone. There was a bit about the Mediterranean in my friend's guidebook. She went down quite a rabbit hole with that one. Apparently there is lots of light and carbon dioxide in the Med, but not much ammonia or nitrates, and not much mixing of the deep water either, which means the sea doesn't get full of algae." "You're a mine of information," Beryl said, sitting down on a stone bench and taking a stone out of her shoe. "Should you have worn those?" Effie said. "They don't look very comfortable." "Il faut souffrir pour être belle, as Mother used to say. One must suffer to be beautiful," Beryl replied. Effie sniffed. "It's going to take a lot more than a pair of Clark's sandals, dear, even if they are red." "Do you two go on holiday together a lot?" I asked. Effie nodded. "We've shared lots of trips. We're both on our own now, and both of us are outraged by the single supplements one has to pay. It's far cheaper to go together and for me to invest in some decent earplugs." Beryl snorted. "I'm the one needing earplugs." "I think not. Sharing with you is how I imagine it would be to bunk up with a capybara. Anyway, it's more fun, not to have to think about what the menfolk are doing or wanting these days, not having to watch sport on the television." "We're old ducks," Anita added, pulling on a bright yellow canvas hat identical to the ones Beryl and Effie were wearing. "Our friend Juliet started it. We're all over 60, but definitely not past it." "I'm pushing 70, Beryl said, "and Effie is 68. "Oh, thanks for telling everyone. And not in my head, I'm not," Effie said. "I always thought getting to be this old would take much longer. I prefer to think I'm 35 plus post and packing charges. In fact, I'm a 35-year-old trapped in a 68-year-old's body."
In which case, perhaps you should get someone to put a couple of darts in, Beryl snorted, earning herself a light slap on the shoulder from her sister. I'm nearly 65, I said, feeling perhaps for the first time that it wasn't something to be embarrassed about. Then you qualify too, Anita said kindly. I'll put your application forward to the president. Juliet's on holiday at the moment in Ibiza. Her husband wanted to go to Scotland, didn't he? Beryl said. And yet, there they are in Ibiza, Anita replied with a knowing look. Beryl pulled her shoes back on and stood up. Right, now then, I thought we were going to get a late lunch and a drink. You're the one holding us up. We could all die of thirst waiting for you, Effie said. Anita and I exchanged a look as we followed the sisters along the road. Are they always like this? I whispered. Anita nodded. Sometimes worse. It's marvellous. We started walking along the dusty track beside the sea, passing a couple of wine bars and cafes, all of which looked perfectly splendid to me. Eventually, after much discussion, we went into a place decorated with white plastic pillars and garlands of